At the Bus Station by the Zimbabwean poet and short story writer Julius Chingono was first published in 2011 in the book Together. Chingono spent most of his life in Zimbabwe and was known for writing, often with humour and irony, about everyday life and the experiences of ordinary people. A former mine worker, he was a poet who lived the life he wrote about. He worked in manual jobs and was not part of the literary elite. His work reflects the voice of the working class Zimbabwean, offering an authentic and sometimes quietly subversive view of society. At the Bus Station is a darkly comic poem that transforms the simple act of boarding a bus into a chaotic battle for survival. It captures the physical danger, overcrowding, and absurdity of public transport in a country struggling with economic collapse. Zimbabwe has suffered from decades of economic hardship, especially under the leadership of President Robert Mugabe. Hyperinflation, unemployment, poverty, and shortages of basic goods and services have all contributed to a sense of national dysfunction. The country has faced major fuel and vehicle shortages and a collapsing infrastructure, with the result that queues and scrambles for public transport have become part of daily life, especially for the working poor. People often have to fight, literally, for a place on a bus. There's no sense of queuing as we might expect in the UK. It's survival of the fittest, and this is what the poem satirises. The poem comprises one single stanza of 30 lines. It is written in free verse, which means that it has neither a fixed metrical or rhythmic structure nor a set rhyme scheme. Lines are, on average, about 5 syllables in length, with some as short as 3 and others as long as 9. Most lines are enjambed, i.e., there is an absence of punctuation at the end of the poetic line. This, in combination with their short length, creates a fragmented, breathless, overwhelming pace which mirrors both the physical crush and the psychological pressure of trying to board the bus. The use of anaphora in the repetition of the word during not only adds a sense of rhythm, but also works to break the boarding process into distinct stages. This repetition reinforces the absurd complexity and extended duration of what should be a simple action. It becomes a kind of mock epic journey, full of escalating peril. Although humorous in tone, the poem acts as a critique of a failed system. It shows how basic, everyday experiences like boarding a bus have become absurd and even dangerous, yet at the same time normalised. Chingono effectively utilises the imperative mood, i.e., pull down, remove, unfasten, tighten, tighten, remove, hold tight, pay no attention, and bear in mind, to write the poem in the style of a survival manual. Because the imperative mood issues commands or instructions, it is addressed to you and places the reader directly into the scenario. This is significant because it creates immediacy and immersion. The reader isn't observing the chaos from a safe distance. They are being spoken to, prepared and warned as if they themselves are about to face the crush. That's what makes the experience so visceral and uncomfortable. It also forces identification. We are not permitted to view the people in the poem as others. We become one of them. That makes the social critique more powerful. The poem doesn't allow the reader to remain a passive observer. It implicates them in the situation. This use of the imperative mood creates a tone that is formal and authoritative, but the absurdity of the hyperbole, e.g., to prevent strangulation, unfasten all buttons, to avoid being undressed, etc., makes it clear that this is a satirical portrait of the socio-economic conditions that make even bus travel an ordeal. Chingono's use of irony and fragmentation expose the deeper social and political issues behind the everyday struggle to get to work, school, or home. Chingono writes in English, a legacy of British colonial rule in the country of Zimbabwe, which was known as Rhodesia until its independence in 1980. His use of controlled, formal, standard English contrasts sharply with the undignified, messy experience he describes, which further adds to the irony. His diction is deliberately plain and unpoetic, rejecting the lyrical flourishes or elevated imagery often associated with poetry. There is neither figurative language, e.g. metaphor, simile or symbolism, nor sound patterning, e.g. alliteration or consonance, and this starkness reflects the bleak realism of the situation. The language is functional, physical and direct, mirroring the practical survival strategies being described. This no-frills style serves several purposes. It emphasises the dehumanising nature of the experience. There is no room for beauty, reflection or imagination in a system that treats people like cargo. It adds to the satirical effect. The extreme seriousness of the speaker's tone, paired with such mundane, literal language, highlights the absurdity of the situation, and it enhances the accessibility and authenticity of the poem. Chingono is writing for and about ordinary people, using the kind of language they themselves might use. Although the poem appears to maintain control through its neat imperative structure and short lines, the syntax tells a more complex story. The poem contains just 4 sentences in total, with their length and placement reflecting the emotional trajectory of the speaker. The first 2 sentences span the opening 10 lines, 5 lines each, setting out instructions in a composed, almost detached tone. There's an illusion of order here, a calm before the storm. The third sentence then explodes across 15 lines, beginning with "during the battle to gain entry to the bus," and ending with "and hold tight to someone until you are in the bus." This section is where the poem loses its grip on composure. In both content and form, it is overtaken by the chaos it tries to describe. The very length of the sentence mirrors the loss of control, as if the speaker is being pulled into the crush alongside the reader. The final 5-line sentence beginning "during the climb" reasserts some level of order. The tone becomes quieter, more internal. The final instruction, "also bear in mind words lose meaning until you are inside the bus," brings the poem to a full stop and implies emotional withdrawal. The poem seems to recover its structure just as the speaker finally achieves entry. The poem begins, "When you arrive at the bus station, pull down your tie or remove the tie to prevent strangulation." The poem begins with a formal, calm and instructional tone, as if offering sensible travel advice. The phrase "when you arrive at the bus station" sets up expectations of order and predictability, almost like a travel manual or a public announcement. But this sense of calm is immediately undercut by the shocking content of the advice. Pull down your tie to prevent strangulation. The violence of the image clashes with the detached tone. The word strangulation is clinical in its coldness, but the image it evokes is alarming. It suggests that entering the bus station puts you at such risk of physical assault that even your clothing can be used against you. This juxtaposition of tone and content is deeply ironic and helps establish the satirical mode of the poem. The speaker treats near-death experiences as everyday hazards, and this contradiction creates a mock-serious atmosphere. The absurdity of the situation is presented with complete earnestness. In the opening 5 lines, Chingono has forced the reader into an uncomfortable position as they are being addressed directly and instructed to prepare for danger in what should be a mundane setting. The poem continues. "During the fight to board the bus, unfasten all buttons of the shirt and jacket to avoid losing the buttons." The poem's second sentence maintains the calm, instructional tone, yet what it describes is increasingly bizarre and unsettling. The use of "during the fight to board the bus" marks a shift from implied danger in the tie's potential for strangulation to explicit physical conflict. The word fight is stark and emotive. It abandons the pretense of polite travel and acknowledges the brute violence at the heart of this everyday experience. At the same time, the language remains curiously impersonal. The use of the definite article "the shirt and jacket" instead of "your shirt and jacket" distances the speaker from the action. It makes the instruction feel more like a generic protocol than personal advice, which only adds to the absurdity, as though it's perfectly routine to partially undress yourself in preparation for violence. Note the deep irony here. The speaker encourages you to unfasten your clothing, not for comfort, but to protect the buttons. It's as if the garment is more at risk than the body, and this is a subtle nod to the illogical priorities that emerge in a system where order has collapsed. We now enter the longest sentence of the poem, a 15-line sprawl that mirrors the complete breakdown of order as the speaker describes the most violent and humiliating stage of the process, the crush to enter the bus. During the battle to gain entry to the bus, tighten both shoelaces, for when you are hauled into the bus, you hang in the air and the shoes may come off. The upgrade from fight in the first sentence to battle in the second is important. The word battle implies something more sustained, serious and even noble, a clash of forces, not just a quick scuffle. Yet this is immediately undermined by the ridiculousness of what is actually at stake: your shoes coming off. The contrast between the elevated diction, e.g. battle and gain entry, and the trivial but humiliating consequences, i.e. you hang in the air and the shoes may come off, gives the poem its distinctive tone, one that is darkly comic, but also quietly tragic. The verb hauled is crucial here. It's violent, involuntary and graceless. There's no agency in this action. You are pulled like a sack rather than stepping in with dignity. This is sharply at odds with the references to clothing that runs through the poem. The tie, the shirt, the shoelaces, all markers of someone trying to present themselves respectably, perhaps for work. The image of a person smartly dressed, yet suspended mid-air, stripped of control and possibly even footwear, is both farcical and deeply dehumanizing. This moment captures the central tension of the poem, the collision between the individual's attempt to maintain order, respectability and dignity, and a system that is so chaotic and brutal that even the effort to protect your shoes becomes an act of desperation. The poem continues, "Tighten your belt to avoid being undressed during the scrambling at the door." This section extends the grotesque comedy of the previous lines. The repetition of the verb tighten, echoing tighten both shoelaces earlier, reinforces the idea of holding yourself together, both physically and metaphorically, in a context where any dignity or control could be stripped away. The phrase "to avoid being undressed" is a clinical way of describing a comically humiliating possibility, i.e. losing your trousers in the crush. Once again, the flat, serious tone heightens the irony. The speaker treats partial nudity as a routine hazard of public transport. There's something quietly tragic here too, as the focus remains on protecting appearances, even in a system that routinely tears people down. The word scrambling is especially effective here. It implies chaotic, animalistic movement which is lacking in order or social courtesy. It conjures up images of clawing, jostling and pushing in a complete breakdown of social cohesion. There's no room for empathy. It's every person for themselves at the bus door. This long central sentence finally comes to an end. Remove your spectacles and hold tight to someone until you are in the bus. This marks a shift from external struggle to internal vulnerability. The instruction to remove your spectacles may seem practical, a precaution to avoid damage, but it also has a deeper emotional resonance. By taking them off, the speaker, and by extension the reader, becomes effectively blind, heightening the sense of disorientation and powerlessness. It suggests a loss of control over how you navigate the world, both literally and metaphorically. The line "hold tight to someone" carries an uncomfortable duality. On the one hand, it implies human contact, a moment of connection amid chaos. On the other, the tone remains emotionally flat. This is not affection, but desperation. The intimacy is forced, not chosen. You do not reach out because you trust, but because you have no choice. This someone, a random person, becomes an involuntary anchor, dragged into the turmoil just as you are, and reinforces the impersonal nature of the interaction. It's not about relationships or solidarity. It's about survival. This moment draws together many of the poem's central themes: the loss of agency, the blurred line between human and animal behaviour, and the quiet tragedy of a system where people are reduced to bodies scrambling for a place. Even the act of entering the bus becomes a kind of surrender, as if getting on board means relinquishing your independence entirely. The poem closes with the instructions: during the climb, pay no attention to human sounds. Also bear in mind words lose meaning until you are inside the bus. This closing sentence offers a bleak reflection on the psychological cost of the boarding process. The word climb evokes something far more arduous and exhausting than stepping onto a bus. It suggests a laborious ascent up a mountain. It casts boarding as both a physical and metaphorical challenge. The instruction to pay no attention to human sounds is chilling. These are not described as words, speech, or cries, but as noises that are stripped of individual identity or emotion. It implies that what the speaker hears from others during this moment of pressure is incoherent, animalistic, and involuntary. These are the grunts, the gasps, and the exclamations of people reduced to instinct. This leads naturally into the most striking and unsettling line of the poem. Words lose meaning until you are inside the bus. This line cuts to the heart of the poem's social critique. In the chaos of the scramble, language, the tool of logic, persuasion, civility, becomes useless. There's no reasoning, no negotiation, and no point in speaking. The line implies a total breakdown of communication and, by extension, of social order. Only when you are inside the bus, when survival is secured, does meaning return and the rules of society begin to reassert themselves. The use of the conjunction until is crucial here. It hints at a temporary suspension of civilization. In this liminal space, neither on the street nor safely aboard, people are not functioning as social beings but as desperate bodies. Once inside, perhaps, the tie is straightened, the shoes adjusted, and speech resumes. But the damage has already been done. The poem ends not with triumph, but with a quiet surrender. The battle is over, the individual intact, but the reader is left disturbed by the recognition that the only way to get there was to abandon language, dignity, and control. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques, and English literature texts.